Who are our favorite wide receiver and tight end plays for week 18 of the NFL season in fantasy football? And who do we fade? And do we trust some of these backups that are going to be in action with players resting? It's time to break it down as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league year-round, whether in season, out of season. We're going to help you dominate and get ready to be awesome in your leagues and DFS, and we'll make you the smartest player in your league all the time. And we're proud to continue to bring you analysis here through week 18. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
As we mentioned yesterday, Michelle, with our running back and quarterback rankings, things are a little bit wonky this week. We hear more news about more quarterbacks that are coming out of the woodwork to start. We have Carson Wentz and Sam Darnold. Jeff Driscoll is out there this week. So it's getting crazy. Blaine Gabbert is starting for the Chiefs. So, yeah, it's a little weird out there, we know. But there's a lot of teams playing for stuff. And those are mainly the teams we're looking for, right? And looking at the best plays at wide receiver and tight end, just like we do with running back and quarterback. We'll get into all those here in a moment on the show. And I think the biggest thing here, Michelle, is just finding guys that are going to be motivated in the right matchups to come through. And I think you have three pretty good choices at wide receiver that are your favorite plays of the week.
Yeah, that's such a big play of fantasy this week, right? The narrative base. How much are these guys really going to be putting it all out for their team? So my first guy is Nico Collins for the Texans. I mean, obviously this game is one of the biggest of the week. The winner goes to the playoffs, the loser stays home. So huge for both the Colts and the Texans. But I talked about yesterday, I think Stroud's going to have a really big game. And if Stroud has a really big game, I think that means Nico Collins is going to have a really big game, right? So the two games without Stroud, it was just terrible for Houston altogether, right? But the one game that Collins played without Stroud, 18 receiving yards. But as soon as Stroud came back, 80 receiving yards again, 7 receptions. The two games prior with Stroud was 191 and a touchdown and 104 yards and a touchdown. So two huge games before Stroud's injury there. And I think it's going to happen again in this nice matchup against the Colts. I think both Stroud, Collins, Singletary, and Schultz should all have nice games here. My next one's, it's going to be tricky, right? He can give you 0 points or he can go off. It's Gabe Davis. I had to mention him one last time for the 2023 season because I don't know if he's going to be a fantasy option next year, right? So I had to mention him. But going up in this matchup against the Dolphins, another absolutely massive matchup this week for the NFL. But the Bills are going to have to get their passing game going before the playoffs here. And Gabe, right now, Stephon Diggs, it's not happening with him, right? Teams are really focusing in on stopping Stephon Diggs. A lot of shorter targets. He's not able to get open intermediate or deep because of how much focus they're putting on. Gabe Davis is going to have to step up big time in this game. And we know he can get those deep passes. And the Dolphins defense against winning teams this year are allowing a league high 139.5 passer rating to winning teams, over 35 points per game, a 74 completion percentage, second worst in the league, and 9.4 pass yards per attempt, which is last in the league. So they've been atrocious against winning teams this year, the passing defense. So I expect Gabe Davis to have a really nice matchup here. And then lastly, a little bit riskier, DJ Chark against the Buccaneers. Love the matchup for him. He's a little banged up, so just keep an eye on his practice report. But Bucs have allowed the second most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. And the last weeks, Chark has been a lot more involved, right? You have Mingo on IR, but last week, 6 targets. Now, it turned into 1 reception for 18 yards. But the week prior, 8 targets. That turned into 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. In this matchup, if he gets 6 to 8 targets, I think he has a really nice game.
Yeah, I think your choices are really spot on in this group here. Now, I will give you some more food for thought and also to support your picks, Michelle. Don't forget, Gabe Davis is probably going to see our favorite corner, Eli Apple, this week. That's going to be good because Jalen Ramsey is going to be on Stephon Diggs for the most part. I think they're going to try to shadow in. I know he plays on a different side, but I would expect, why wouldn't you put Jalen Ramsey on Stephon Diggs in this game? Take him out just like a lot of these other teams are doing. So Eli Apple, Gabe Davis, that's a one-sided matchup here. I do have a prediction for where Gabe Davis is going to land, and I think we're going to like it next year. I think he's going to go to Kansas City and be the deep threat that they really need there. And this is going to cause a lot of consternation with Bills fans because they'll have to now see him on the other side in big games. But he needs to get to a better team that's going to use him better as a deep threat. And look, it's not been all that great for him, but this matchup is smashable for sure with the Dolphins, and he should get a lot of targets in this one. DJ Chark, the other thing that is at play here is Jonathan Mingo has been shut down, so there's no Mingo. So if Chark is out there, then you figure he's going to get a healthy dose of targets against the Buccaneers. The question is, are we going to see him from week 16 or week 17? But the upside is there. And I think you look at it and look, the Panthers have nothing to lose. So might as well just keep throwing to these guys and see what happens. So I love your picks there. Now, I think you'll probably like some of mine. One guy I'm not 100% sure of, but I think you'll be on board with Brandin Cooks. This is a great matchup against the Commanders. We know what Cooks can do in a lot of games, and he's been pretty solid, right? I mean, CeeDee Lamb is like Stephon Diggs, but he's getting open all the time and making big plays. And there's a little bit of a trickle down, right? And really, you haven't seen any of these other receivers, whether it's of Michael Gallup or anyone else, or just getting these guys, Jalen Tolbert. You don't really see any of those guys getting involved. It's pretty much three receivers here, right? CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and Brandin Cooks. And Cooks is the type of guy that can drive the Commander secondary nuts. He's speed, he's quick. He can get open all over the field. So I do love this, and I think the Cowboys are going to roll the Commanders, knowing that they can win the very competitive NFC East with this win. Now, the next guy I have is DeAndre Hopkins. This guy is going for some incentives, Michelle. We talked about a little bit. I think they're going to make it a point. And they're very modest incentives. I think he only has to get like 70 yards and 5 catches or something. But look, we'll take that, right? He's been so up and down for this season. And you probably have Ryan Tannehill out there. So at least Tannehill is going to probably get DeAndre Hopkins open. We know the matchup against the Jaguars is pretty good. Their secondary has struggled all the time. They can play some zone, which is going to help DeAndre Hopkins. He can beat that and get open. So I think DeAndre Hopkins has one final big game. We'll see if this is his last game for Tennessee, or last game in the NFL. We'll see. I mean, it's been an injury-riddled kind of end here to his career. So we'll see if that plays out. And the guy I had to mention this week, because I love what he did for me last week, Greg Dortch. He came through for me. I just needed a wide receiver 3 to be decent. Okay, when I had Puka Nacua on my team, I just needed decent wide receiver 3. Dortch did what he was supposed to do. Catch the key targets that were there, help the Cardinals beat the Eagles, and now they get the Seahawks. The Seahawks secondary has struggled, and I really like the chemistry between Kyler Murray and Greg Dortch. I think Dortch could have a big year next year because, look, they'll probably go Trey McBride, Dortch. They're not going to re-sign Marquise Hollywood Brown, so there's no way they want to get rid of Dortch. He's been very reliable in both offenses for Kyler Murray when he's gotten the chance. So I think he has one more nice game here against the Seahawks. So you might disagree with one and a half of those, but look, we got to dig a little bit deeper this week.
What's nice about the Cowboys game is that they probably have to play their starters for at least the majority of the game, unless they just start blowing them out, because the division is on the line, and you have the Eagles playing that the same exact time. So unless you see the Eagles are getting smoked or something, which I don't think is going to happen against the Giants, Cowboys have to keep their starters out there and try to win this game. So that's great for all of these weapons, Dak and CD and Brandin Cooks. And like you said, it's just a great matchup. We'll see with DeAndre Hopkins. He's so up and down. I can't predict anything with that man. And Greg Dortch, that's a good pick there. He's solid, right? He's just a solid player that won't disappoint you too much. Yeah. Nice matchup. We expect this to be a high-scoring game, so I like it. One guy I am fading this week because I expect this game to be a very, very low-scoring matchup is Garrett Wilson against the Patriots. Neither the Jets or Patriots have anything to care about in this game. And hopefully this is Garrett Wilson's last game where we have to be sad about him, right? I brought up how many targets he's seeing this year. Hopefully next year we get to go into the season with him having a real quarterback. But unfortunately, he still is left with no real quarterback right now, even if it's Zach Wilson. He's had 25 targets over the last 2 weeks, 10 targets last week. It turned into 5 receptions, 50 yards. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 12. Last game against the Patriots early on in the season, he had 9 targets. It ended in 5 receptions, 48 yards. Just he's not doing anything because of the quarterbacks. Last year in New England, had an atrocious game. I expect Bill Belichick to shut down Garrett Wilson, and I want no part of him this week.
Yeah, he's the easy guy to take out of the game. It's really hard to take Breece Hall out of the game because he's so versatile and you can do different things with him. If he's not running well, you can throw it to him in the backfield, get some open space for him. But you really can't do that. If they're intent on taking away Garrett Wilson, they're going to do it because there's nobody else. I mean, all these guys that they try to shuffle in, what a joke. I mean, Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb and these guys who couldn't get anything done here, go get a legitimate number 2 for Garrett Wilson. And they had one kind of with Corey Davis, but he got hurt. So, and then he retired. So they need to find a guy that can replace that spot and really be a number 2 next year. So that's important. Now, we mentioned my guy, so I won't spend too much time on him, is Stephon Diggs. I mean, his numbers since week 6, that's his last 100-yard game, Michelle. Somehow he's over 1,000 for the season and has 100 receptions. So if you have him in PPR, you're somewhat okay, but you drafted him really high in the first round, right? This is not what you're looking for. You're looking for double-digit touchdowns. You're looking for 1,300, 1,400 yards. You're looking for 120 catches.
Yeah.
You're not getting any of that. If he didn't have that early stretch, he would be a total bust this year, Michelle. He's been just bad over the last several games. He has one game over 70 yards in the last 7. So that's not very good at all. So, yeah, you got to fade him. I don't know what's wrong. There's something off between him and Josh Allen. They were best buds. Maybe they had a falling out. Something weird. And the play caller, Joe Brady, is not really forcing it to Diggs the way that Josh Allen was before with Ken Dorsey. So all those things considered, all things point to. I don't love Diggs. I mean, we still keep ranking him inside the top 20. I think we're just scared they will have that big game. But look, you probably have to play him in certain situations, but it's just been ugly.
Yeah, it's what I almost listed him exactly here as my one fade of the week. I'm happy that you were brave enough to do it. It's like you can see him having a monster game in this super big performance, but you made a great point. Since Joe Brady became the OC, that's like they're not forcing the ball to Diggs, and Allen's not having as many turnovers, and they're running the ball more, and they're just being a little bit safer with the ball because that was pretty much all. That was the only thing that was hurting them. They were scoring points. It was all the turnovers that were killing them. So they've gone away from that, and that's what makes me think it's not going to be fixed this week, especially if Ramsey is covering him for most of the game. So I'm with you there. We're going to get into our favorite fades and favorite tight ends of the week for week 18 right after we talk about one of our great sponsors. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever find that just as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed or at other inopportune moments? It turns out one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk them through. Therapy gives you a place to do that, as you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to your best self. The tight ends this week, Vinnie, are not ideal. I'll say that. You have your top guys, and some of them may be resting or whatnot, but trying to find guys in the middle of the pack here where you're considering is not super easy. So who are your 2 top favorite tight ends this week, not considering the top guys like Trey McBride or Sam Laporta or those type of players?
Yeah, those are the top guys because there's going to be no Travis Kelce. There's going to be no George Kittle. There's going to be no Isaiah Likely, no David Njoku. So all these guys that we've trusted all season long are just not there. So it's hard. It's a hard position for sure this particular week. So we mentioned him a few times now with CJ Stroud and now Nico Collins. Dalton Schultz is one of my plays. And again, he's got some incentives. Again, they're not big incentives in his contract, but they're still big. I mean, for a player like Schultz, he's not the quarterback getting 30, 40 million a year. He needs to go out there and get those, right? And look, this is a good matchup also because Noah Brown looks like he's very iffy for this game. Like, he's hurting. So they need another target other than Collins without Tank Dell in there. Look, the Colts have been kind of up and down against the tight end. It's not like they're really great at anything. I don't know defensively, but they just kind of get by. But you mentioned something as well that was interesting. This is the first real quarterback they've seen in weeks. So if there's some zone there that you get Dalton Schultz to sit down there, I really like him to produce this week, especially, again, you look at CJ Stroud, he's going to trust his guys, and those are Collins and Schultz, right? There's a big game. They need to go with the go-to guys that have been there for him all season. Now, Darren Waller really came on last week. I thought he was dead in fantasy. I thought it was over, right? This is the last we're going to see of him. He wasn't going to come back. But you look at the Eagles, they really struggled against him and Daniel Bellinger just a couple weeks ago in that matchup. So that bodes well. And then last week, Waller really got going downfield with Tyrod Taylor in there. So when you look at Taylor, there's some chemistry, right? We talked about Darius Slayton, Darren Waller, and some of these guys that are the old reliables come through when the veteran quarterback comes in there. So I do like that. The Eagles have been struggling against the tight end all year long. They got a little bit better in the middle of the season, then they got worse again. So I feel great about Dalton Schultz and Darren Waller this week. And look, I wish Waller had been healthy all year. We might have been talking about him more as a tight end one.
Yeah, I know. It would have been nice to see I think Waller's pretty much done so, right, in the NFL. Like, he might continue to stay here, but for fantasy, he can't really be considered. His body's just falling apart. But this is a nicer matchup, and we'll see how much the Giants have a desire to beat up on the Eagles and maybe knock them out of winning that division title if the Cowboys happen to lose. But Schultz is definitely one of the best plays of the week. I'm expecting him to be one of the most expensive ones in DFS, but he might be worth of that pay up, right? Because like you mentioned, all of those top guys are out. So you don't want to pay up for McBride or Sam Laporta maybe, but Schultz might be that next best value there because I brought up CJ Stroud. I expect him to have a good game. It's going to be Stroud, Nico Collins, and Schultz. You would expect to be those top guys in the receiving game. So I really like that. My two is Juwan Johnson versus the Falcons and Tucker Kraft against the Bears. So with Juwan Johnson, I mean, he's just been getting it done, right? It's scoring touchdowns. He has a receiving touchdown in each of the last 3 games. He has 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. So it seems like Derek Carr is really leaning on Juwan Johnson, and Derek Carr has been performing better too. So it's working. I wouldn't expect him to go away.
I can't believe you said that, but I'll take it.
I know. I never like to give Derek Carr any credit, but he has been looking a little bit better. And the Falcons are a nice matchup for tight ends, right? Giving up the 7th most fantasy points to tight ends this season. So nice matchup. There's no reason for the targets not to be there. No reason for Carr not to keep leaning on him. So I like this for him. And then Tucker Kraft, he's just been a weekly good start, solid start. It's not like he has super high upside. But in the Bears matchup, they are giving up the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends this season. I do expect the Bears to put up points in this game, which means the Packers are going to have to put up points to stay with them. Luke Musgrave didn't end up playing last week. So if he does play this week, there's still going to be that ramp up stage, right, for his snaps. So I don't expect him to steal too many snaps from Kraft in this game, even if he does play. Jaden Reed is doubtful. That's going to leave more targets to go around. We'll see if Christian Watson can go. But 6 targets in each of the last 3 weeks. I think Kraft is one of the safer plays again. Again, not super high upside, but just a safe play from week to week.
Yeah, I mean, remember how much I talked about Juwan Johnson in the preseason? I'm just shocked how little they've used him, right? And part of it is they try to force in Michael Thomas back. And, of course, Michael Thomas got hurt and disappeared, as he usually does. And I thought it would be this trio, right, that they were going to get the ball downfield. But then it became check down city to Alvin Kamara. And then, okay, where's Chris Olave? Where's Rashid Shaheed? But once Derek Carr said, I'm going to throw to Olave, I'm going to throw to Shaheed, I'm going to throw to Juwan Johnson, be a little bit more confident in my weapons downfield, the production has been there, right? So it's really more about Carr and the way they've schemed up this offense and why Juwan Johnson. I mean, this guy's, you look at him, he's big, he's athletic. Why don't they use him a lot more? So I think you saw that down the stretch. So I love that pick by you there. And look, Juwan might be someone we're going to watch next year as well. They probably say goodbye to Michael Thomas at this point. Tucker Kraft, you're going to watch him. It could be very much, I think it was very similar where we had, it's going back a while, where they had a couple tight ends, Jay Sternberger and Robert Tonyan. We were all on maybe Sternberger being the guy, but Tonyan was the guy for a little bit, right, in their offense. And Tucker Kraft might be that guy who stays healthy and is more productive than Luke Musgrave going forward. So something to look at. But clearly a lot of trust. And look, if Bo Melton has to be the top wide receiver, they got to throw a lot to Tucker Kraft in that game. Now, before we get into our final segment here, we're going to reveal some fades of the week. I'm going to do mine real quick for you guys that I think you're probably going to have to be stuck playing, but I don't love them in DFS or anything this week. And number one is Evan Ingram. He is my fade. The Titans have allowed the fewest fantasy points to tight ends. He only had 25 receiving yards in the first matchup. Now, Evan Ingram has been frustrating. He's had a couple blow-up games with touchdowns like he always does. Somehow crept his way to 100 receptions, but never dazzling, right? He's there. I just don't like this matchup at all against the Titans. They're just really good at racing this position. It's even happened after they lost to Kevin Byard. So, no, I can't go with Evan Ingram for a high upside game, especially in DFS. And Jake Ferguson, I think he's productive, but he can disappear from the game plan, right? The first matchup, he had one catch for 35 yards against the Commanders. They're actually pretty good against the tight end, but I'm just worried it could be just CeeDee Lamb, Brandin Cooks are going to get wide open all over the field, downfield, and they don't need Jake Ferguson. So it's more of a fade based on the schematics, and that's really why the Commanders are not good or at wide receiver. And they're just okay at everything else, but really the numbers say that people are just throwing all the way downfield with wideouts, and that really can hurt tight ends. And we know that's kind of an underrated thing that can happen in some games.
Yeah, if you have either of these two guys in, like, say you're still playing week 18 in your championship, even rolling with them, I think it's fine to keep rolling with them. I don't like the matchups are a little bit worrisome, but I'm not gonna go too crazy about that and try to grab some off waivers. But in DFS, I think you're right to pivot off of these guys. Jake Ferguson, the thing is, the Cowboys might have a ton of scoring opportunities, right? So maybe Jake Ferguson could have a 2-touchdown game to save his day. I don't expect a ton of yards, so you're really leaning on touchdowns there. You definitely went bolder than mine because, well, I have Dallas Goedert, and he has been. He's been better as of late. I mean, honestly, it took a really long time this year, but he's getting targets. He's getting receiving yards. He got a touchdown last week, finally, for his first since week 7. But I don't want him in this game because, again, it's not the same situation as the Cowboys. Cowboys win and they're in, right? But they do play at the same time. And if there's a solid chance the Cowboys could be up by 20 points against the Commanders in the going into halftime. You know that the Eagles are going to be checking that score. And if at a point it looks like the Cowboys are just going to destroy the Commanders, they could pull out their starters, right? They're just going to rest. They're going to be the 5th seed no matter what if the Cowboys win. So that's my worry about these starters with the Cowboys in this game. And the Giants, he did have a solid game against the Giants a couple weeks ago, 7 receptions, 71 yards. You would be super happy with that from any tight end. But the Giants overall this season have been pretty solid against the tight end position. So I don't think this is a great matchup. Plus the risk of them ending up benching their starters in the second half. I'm not willing to take that risk. And then my second guy, he's ranked pretty high in consensus this week, and that's why I included him. Gerald Everett against the Chiefs. He is getting targets, but I don't care. They're coming from Easton Stick, and they're turning into nothing. I mean, he's getting 9 targets over the last 4 games. That turned into 39, 41, 42, and 31 yards. Like, it's not turning into anything. There's no upside playing him. And, there's just nothing there for him. The Chiefs are very, very good against tight ends all season long, and maybe they rest some of their best defensive starters, but still, it's Easton Stick. I'm not going with Gerald Everett. What's the upside? He has 5 receptions for 50 yards. Go with anybody else that can offer you something greater. He has, what does he have? 3 touchdowns all season long and none since week 12. No, thank you.
Yeah, this is where I have a little bit of problem with the usage stuff that we get, right? The targets and the volume. We always say volume is king, but not always, right? It has to be effective volume. You need to get open and be targeted well. If you have an inaccurate quarterback, it doesn't matter if you get targets, right? It's just really bad that we just rely upon that. And that's the only reason you're right, that he's ranked that high. Oh, he got 8-9 targets. Great. But if the quarterback's not getting the ball, that's not going to help us a lot. So, I mean, in a lot of cases, targets are great, but again, we've seen a lot of bad quarterback play out there. So look, and you also look at the numbers, the Chiefs are pretty good against the tight end. And that's one thing. I think the only reason that you would look at him here, who are they throwing the ball to? It's just Alec Erickson and Gerald Everett at this point. And if the Chiefs kind of say, okay, we're not going to play some of our key safeties and corners that we want are a little bit banged up, then there could be some open garbage time in the second half. But in terms of straight up wanting to play him, he's been boring, right? He's a guy that you see in the rankings and you're like, oh, is he really going to come through this week? And most of the times he doesn't. So I don't know. I wish the Chargers would really focus and draft a tight end next year for Justin Herbert. That's, I think, job one, and get that position more involved in the new offense. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, we'll have some wacky backups playing for 5 teams in particular that are sitting players this week. So we'll see if we're going to take a shot at any of these guys. We'll do that in our final segment. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you about another one of our fine sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. It's the start of a new year, and that means every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. You probably are too. What's one move I can make that I can take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Look, having the right team combination, all that is important in the NFL and fantasy football. It's very important and critical to your small business. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than a million professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified and quality candidates. So easy that, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resource to hire. Thankfully, LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show, and we're going to do what we did yesterday. Look at some of these backups that are going to be in action. We know Sam Darnold and Carson Wentz, and now Tyler Huntley and Jeff Driscoll and Blaine Gabbert. These are the quarterbacks for these 5 teams. So knowing that, let's go down the line. 49er, let's start with this. Ronnie Bell, who had one big replacement game early in the season, and Charlie Warner with Ross Dwelly hurt and George Kittle out. What do you think? Any of those 49ers?
I'm not touching Charlie Warner, but I think Ronnie Bell's a really nice, sneaky play in DFS. Sam Darnold and Ronnie Bell had, some practice time together as backups and had those preseason games together and showed a little bit of a connection there. So with Juwan Jennings, also he's been injured, banged up. I would expect them to sit him as well. So Ronnie Bell is going to have to be that dude there. If Ayuk and Deebo and Kittle, they're all resting for the majority of the game at least. I actually really like Ronnie Bell in DFS, but Charlie Warner, I'm not getting cute with.
Yeah, Ronnie Bell is a good field stretcher too. The Rams can give up some big plays, and you figure they're going to rest some of their key defensive players, including Aaron Donald in this game. Now, speaking of the Rams, that's the next team up here. Tyler Higbee's banged up. You don't expect him to play. I think they'll be judicious with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Carson Wentz isn't there, so Davis Allen, DeMarcus Robinson, tight end, wide receiver. I guess you'd have to feel a little bit better about DeMarcus, given that he's been productive anyway.
Yeah, DeMarcus has been on fire, right? He's getting so many targets last 2 weeks, 82 yards and a touchdown, and then 92 yards last week. I mean, he's doing his thing. I wouldn't expect them to worry about resting him too much. So Carson Wentz is going to have to throw to someone. I like that. And the last time Davis Allen without Tyler Higbee, he had a pretty solid game. 4 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown. So you could do worse than Davis Allen. If you need to go super cheap in DFS or you need someone off waivers this week, I think Davis Allen is an option. I would see no reason why Tyler Higbee would play. Suffered a dislocated shoulder last week. They're not playing really for anything too important here, 6th or 7th seed. So I wouldn't imagine Higbee's in. So I like both of these guys, Davis Allen and DeMarcus Robinson.
Yeah, that's a good call. Especially 49ers could be careful with like Fred Warner, and he's kind of the tight end eraser. So that's something to look at there. Now the Ravens. Now I had you had Charlie Collard there, and I had to add Odell Beckham Jr. here because look, I don't think Zay Flowers is going to play. Odell has some weird incentives on his contract. Of course, he has to go bonkers in this game to get it, but I think they might try at least, and we'll see with Tyler Huntley. So I don't think I'm interested in this other Charlie either, but OBJ, I think I would take a shot.
What's interesting is if you're playing like Prize Picks or DFS or something, I would like the touchdown for Collard if you're able to put a bet on that, because Huntley has 7 passing touchdowns in his career. 5 of those 7 have gone to either Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, or Charlie Collier, which is so 5 of the 7 went to a tight end. Clearly, Huntley likes his tight end position. The most targets he has in his career by a massive chunk is Mark Andrews with 87. Marquise Brown is second at 39. So massive there that he just loved to go to Mark Andrews. So I think he will look for his tight end position. And the Steelers are incredibly weak over the middle. They don't have any inside linebackers worth even naming because they're all injured. So incredibly weak over the middle. I like Charlie Collier to have a touchdown in this game and possibly some nice receiving yards as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, good analysis there with touchdown. I mean, the Ravens are going to have to throw to somebody. I think there's a chance both of these guys could score, one on a big play, one on a short play. And Tyler Huntley, not a bad streamer this week, given he's been a super sub for Lamar Jackson in the past. Now, Cleveland is a little bit trickier, right? It's their 5th starting quarterback. That's right, 5 starting quarterbacks for the Browns. They really wanted to make that happen here. So I'm not sure what you're going to get from Jeff Driscoll. I have no idea. I mean, you have PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They were at least on the team. Like, I don't see him becoming Joe Flacco, coming off the couch and being good. And I don't know what his chemistry is with any of these guys, Cedric Tillman and Harrison Bryant. Now, on paper, Harrison Bryant, I think, is the play here. I don't know if I can trust any of the wide receivers, though.
Yeah, Harrison Bryant would be the play for me as well. Again, you're just looking at Jeff Driscoll's prior usage of players. Among all players that Driscoll has targeted in his career, CJ Uzomah, who's a tight end, leads them all, right? It's a small sample size, probably doesn't really matter. It's Jeff Driscoll. I'm not trusting anybody else on this Browns team, but Harrison Bryant is an option if you're desperate. But I would rather go with Charlie Collier or Davis Allen. So if you already have those options in DFS that are cheap, there's really no reason to get cute with Harrison Bryant.
Yeah, we've given you some good options there if you're going to fade Ingram or Ferguson or Goddard or
which I would
Everett.
not fade Ingram or Ferguson for Harrison Bryant. I'll say that.
Okay, that's fair. But if you are and you want to get some cheap, I mean, these are cheap guys, right? I mean, you have to look at the value that you're going to get. If you're going to pay up for this, may be a great week, right, to punt at tight end, save some money, and pay up at the positions where you know the guys are going to be after it and put up some points. So something to consider there. Now, I actually like both of these next guys. This last team we're on, the Chiefs, I actually think they're both going to produce this week based on the kind of matchup is so good against the Chargers that Blaine Gabbert and the scheme is going to be good. So Richie James and Noah Gray, I think these guys are basically the poor man's version of Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce this week. So you figure if the offense runs through these two positions, the slot and the tight end, you'd see some production here. So I actually like both of them. Really cheap, though, not really high upside plays, though.
Yeah, and maybe Rashee Rice even plays. Did they say if they're benching him? I mean, he's a rookie.
They'll be careful,
Yeah, they'll probably be careful. But Noah Gray definitely is a solid option here. He's been getting targets as well. Again, like these backup quarterbacks like their tight ends. So again, Blaine Gabbert's number 1 target in his career was Mercedes Lewis, another tight end.
Yeah.
Like there's a pattern here. Backup tight ends backup quarterbacks like tight ends. I like Noah Gray and Richie James. Richie James is kind of like a Greg Dortch play where it feels like it's kind of safe. He's going to get targets and some receptions, maybe not a lot of yards on those receptions, but I like this matchup is great against the Chargers.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs should have used these guys a lot more. I mean, I think they're both talented. Their offense was struggling. Why wouldn't you give these guys more of an opportunity? But I don't know. Maybe it's just the thing where they're stuck and they're kind of stuck with like, okay, this guy plays this position, so we can't really play this guy behind him, that kind of thing. And that's one thing that kind of hurts the Chiefs sometimes with their personal looks. But this will be a chance to get these guys going. Maybe some of these guys inspire and say, hey, we might want to use them in the playoffs a little bit more in certain matchups. So a lot of good stuff there on this wide receiver and tight end ranking show. We'll look at some flexes, some deep sleepers, and some prize picks of the week. They're to close the week of shows tomorrow. For this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.